Elizabeth Taylor, the violet-eyed goddess of Hollywood's golden age, once captivated the world with a beauty so extraordinary that cameras struggled to capture it. However, behind the dazzling diamonds and 8 marriages was a scandal so shocking. It nearly destroyed her career and turned America's sweetheart into the most hated woman in the country. What Elizabeth did in 1958 would make headlines for years, but the truth behind her actions was far more complicated than anyone knew. In 1958, Elizabeth Taylor seemed to have everything. At only 26 years old, she was already one of Hollywood's biggest stars, having grown up on screen from National Velvet to her Oscar-nominated role in Giant. Her marriage to film producer Mike Todd was the envy of Hollywood, a passionate love affair that gave her the stability she'd always craved. They had just welcomed their daughter Liza, and for the first time in her chaotic life, Elizabeth felt genuinely happy. Then on March 22, 1958, Mike Todd's private plane crashed in New Mexico, killing everyone on board. Elizabeth was supposed to be on that flight. At the last minute, she'd stayed home with a cold. The guilt consumed her immediately. She collapsed. At the funeral, sedated and barely conscious, while flashbulbs exploded around her grief, Hollywood watched as America's most beautiful woman crumbled into a shell of herself, lost in a darkness that terrified everyone around her. That's when Eddie Fisher stepped in. Eddie was Todd's best friend, the crooner married to America's sweetheart, Debbie Reynolds. He came to comfort the widow, to help her through the unbearable pain. But somewhere between the late-night conversations and shared memories of Mike, comfort turned into something else. Elizabeth, drowning in grief and pills, reached for Eddie like a lifeline. And he reached back. The affair exploded into public consciousness in September 1958, when Eddie left Debbie and their 2 young children for Elizabeth. The backlash was instantaneous and vicious. Debbie Reynolds, with her wholesome girl-next-door image, became America's victim. Elizabeth became the Scarlet Woman, the homewrecker, the woman who stole her best friend's husband. Death threats poured in by the hundreds. The Vatican condemned her. 60 members of Congress signed a petition to ban her from America. Outside, theaters showing her films. Protesters carried signs reading, "Drink Coca-Cola and get a free pass to see Elizabeth the Great in Butterfield 8. Deny her the respect she does not deserve." Her career hung by a thread, but what the public didn't know was the whole truth. Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher's marriage had been troubled long before Elizabeth entered the picture. Eddie had already had multiple affairs that Debbie had quietly forgiven. Their perfect marriage was largely a studio creation, carefully maintained for the cameras. Elizabeth refused to apologize or hide. When MGM forced her to make Butterfield 8, playing a high-class call girl as punishment for her scandal, she poured every ounce of rage and pain into the performance. She won the Oscar for Best Actress in 1961, though she later admitted it was a pity Oscar, Hollywood's way of apologizing after she nearly died from pneumonia during filming. Her marriage to Eddie lasted only 5 years. While filming Cleopatra in Rome in 1962, Elizabeth fell for her co-star Richard Burton, abandoning Eddie just as she'd once claimed him. The pattern repeated, this time with even more intensity. She and Burton married, divorced, remarried, and divorced again, their love affair becoming the most famous and destructive romance in Hollywood history. Years later, Elizabeth and Debbie Reynolds reconciled, finally becoming friends again on a cruise ship in 1966. Debbie admitted that her anger had been misdirected, that Eddie was never worth the fight. But by then, Elizabeth had already earned her reputation as the woman who took what she wanted, consequences be damned. The truth is, Elizabeth Taylor never apologized for loving fiercely, even when that love destroyed everything around her. She once said, "I've been through it all, baby, I'm Mother Courage." And she was. She survived child stardom, 8 marriages, near-death experiences, and public crucifixion. She lost the love of her life in a plane crash and was vilified for seeking comfort. Yet she kept living, kept loving, kept fighting until her final breath in 2011. Elizabeth Taylor taught Hollywood that even America's sweethearts have the right to be human, messy, and unapologetically themselves.